Have you ever driven past an abandoned carnival in the dead of night? The kind where the rusty Ferris wheel creaks in the wind and tattered canvas flaps like dying breaths against metal poles. Well, I need to warn you about something. You see, my friends and I discovered that sometimes these carnivals aren't as abandoned as they seem. But before I tell you what happened that night, you need to understand something about Sterling County. Our little town has always had a strange relationship with carnivals. Back in the 1950s, when MADDER'S Carnival first started setting up at the fairgrounds, it was the highlight of everyone's summer. Old-timers still talk about how Mr. Madder himself would stand at the entrance, his red tailcoat gleaming in the sun, greeting every visitor with a gold-toothed smile. But even then, there were whispers. Kids would go missing during the carnival's run, only to show up weeks later with no memory of where they'd been. Animals in the petting zoo would be found mutilated in ways that no natural predator could manage. And the clowns, well, people said their laughs didn't sound quite human. My grandmother used to tell me stories about how she saw one of them eating a live rabbit behind the tilt-a-whirl. But everyone dismissed her as senile. I wish we'd listened. The carnival ran every summer until 1997, when a series of mysterious disappearances forced them to shut down. The official story was bankruptcy, but my dad, who worked for the local paper, said the police found something in the funhouse that made several officers quit the force. The reports were sealed, and the carnival was abandoned overnight. Equipment, rides, even personal belongings. Everything was left behind, as if the carnival workers had vanished into thin air. It happened last summer when my friends Jake, Maria, and I were driving back from a Midnight Hollow concert around midnight. Jake was still buzzing from the music. Maria was complaining about her feet hurting from dancing, and I was trying to stay awake at the wheel. That's when we passed the old fairgrounds. The place had been sitting there rotting for decades. Just rusted rides and weather-beaten booths, slowly being reclaimed by nature. But that night something was different. The air felt charged, like just before a lightning strike. The moon was full, casting long shadows through the skeleton of the Ferris wheel, and the wind carried something that made my skin crawl. It sounded like calliope music, but played at quarter speed, distorted and wrong. Jake, always the daredevil, suddenly sat up straight in the passenger seat. "Guys, we have to check it out," he said, his eyes gleaming with that look that always meant trouble. Come on. When's the last time we did something exciting? Maria and I exchanged glances in the rearview mirror. We'd known Jake since elementary school, and his ideas of exciting had landed us in the emergency room more than once. But there was something in the air that night, something that made us reckless. That was our first mistake. The chain-link fence surrendered easily to the bolt cutters Jake always kept in his trunk for emergencies. As we slipped inside, I noticed the no trespassing signs were covered in strange symbols, drawn in what looked like rust or dried blood. The gravel crunched beneath our feet as we walked past rows of empty game booths, their faded awnings hanging like loose skin. The air smelled wrong, like cotton candy mixed with something metallic and rotten, like spoiled meat left in the sun. Old stuffed animals hung from the booth rafters, their button eyes somehow following our movement. Maria picked up a moldy teddy bear, and I swear it turned its head to watch her. We were approaching the carousel when it happened. The soft tinkling of circus music grew louder, but it wasn't coming from any speakers we could see. It seemed to be coming from the ground itself, vibrating up through our feet. Before we could process what was happening, lights flickered to life across the carnival. Not bright modern bulbs, but sickly yellow illumination that seemed to pulse like a dying heartbeat. The carousel began to turn, its horses moving up and down in jerky motions, their painted eyes somehow looking more alive than they should. Their wooden nostrils flared, breathing in the night air. That's when we saw the first clown. It stepped out from behind the ticket booth, moving in a way that wasn't quite right, like a marionette with tangled strings. Its makeup wasn't the bright, cheerful kind you'd expect. Instead, the colors seemed to shift and swirl, and its smile was full of teeth that were far too sharp to be human. Its costume looked wet, dripping a dark liquid that sizzled when it hit the ground. More emerged from the shadows, their laughs echoing across the grounds, but these weren't laughs of joy. They were the sounds of predators who'd just cornered their prey. One of them spoke, its voice like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Welcome to MADDER'S Carnival, where the fun never ends, and neither does the hunger." We ran. God, how we ran. But the carnival had come alive around us. Every ride was operating, their mechanisms screaming with decades of rust and disuse. The Ferris wheel spun impossibly fast, cars detaching and crashing into the ground. The roller coaster tracks twisted like serpents, trying to snatch us as we passed. The clowns were everywhere, moving impossibly fast, their fingers elongated into claws, their mouths opening wider than any human mouth should. The cotton candy machine started spinning, spewing out strands that looked like pink flesh. Maria screamed as one grabbed her ankle. I'll never forget the sound she made as it dragged her into the Hall of Mirrors. We could hear her screaming inside, her voice bouncing off 1,000 reflections, each echo more desperate than the last. Then we heard what sounded like breaking glass, and her screams turned into something else, something that didn't sound human anymore. Jake tried to help her, but another clown emerged from the cotton candy stand. Its face split into a grin that literally went from ear to ear. Black ichor dripped from its teeth as it reached for him. I saw what happened to Jake. I wish I hadn't. The clown's jaw unhinged, like a snake's. And no, I can't describe what happened next. The sounds still wake me up at night. I managed to escape, but not before I saw what was behind the carnival's magic. In the back, past the rides and games, stood Mr. Madder himself, still in that red tailcoat, but now his skin was gray and stretched too tight across his bones. His gold teeth glinted in the moonlight as he conducted his carnival of horrors with a baton made of what looked like human bone. Sometimes I still hear the calliope music in my dreams. I see faces in my mirror that shouldn't be there, painted faces with hungry smiles. The carnival is still there, looking just as abandoned as ever. But now I know the truth. It's not abandoned at all. It's waiting. Waiting for more curious teenagers who think it's fun to explore places that should be left alone. The police never found Jake or Maria. Their families still put up missing person posters, but I know they'll never be found. Sometimes late at night I drive past the fairgrounds. And sometimes I swear I can see them on the carousel, riding the painted horses. But their faces aren't their own anymore. So next time you're driving past an old carnival at night, and you think you hear music on the wind or see lights flickering in the darkness, don't stop. Don't look back. And whatever you do, don't go inside. Because in the forgotten carnival, the show never really ended. It just found a new kind of audience to entertain. And Mr. Madder is always looking for new performers to join his eternal circus. Always.